Is Ace Bailey becoming undervalued, and why should the Jazz be absolutely delighted to take him at 5 if he's there? Find out next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Jazz. My name is Leif Thulin. I'm excited to be back with you guys, filling in for David Locke on Locked On Jazz. As many of you guys know by now, I'm the lifelong Jazz fan who's a credentialed NBA draft analyst for Locked On NBA Big Board, attendee of the 2023 and 2024 NBA Draft Combine, Jazz broadcast assistant, statistician, the last 4 seasons for the Utah Jazz. Wow, that's crazy to think about. Lover of college basketball, so don't expect all the geeky numbers of usual to be gone. But I'll bring a unique perspective as a diehard college hoops fan, NBA draft analyst, and someone who works for the Jazz, gets to see them up close and personal, and most importantly, a fan, to make you guys as knowledgeable as possible about your Utah Jazz as we head into a critical juncture and drafting it and pick number 5 and take you through all the possibilities. So thank you guys for making Locked On Jazz your first listen each and every day. And remember, Locked On Jazz is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Jazz, where the best way to help us grow is to comment anything below. Today's question is a simple one. What do you think Ace Bailey's role will be in the NBA? And tell me how many points you think he averages at his peak. I'll try to engage with you. I've been appreciating your guys' comments, and I've been reading all of them. So, by the way, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And today on the show, on the agenda, I'm going to tell you guys my read on the dialogue around Ace Bailey, which I think is mostly negative right now, and I think it's a little bit weird, and why I feel the Jazz would be lucky to get him at 5, why I think he's becoming underrated in this class, strangely, and what I think actually happens in the draft regarding all the rumors and his stock and how it impacts the Jazz. So all that is ahead on Locked On Jazz. So let's dive right in. First and foremost, Ace Bailey is incredibly talented. That's the thing that I think is getting washed aside by nitpicking his deficiencies. The guy's incredibly talented. And at one point, he was the guy that was the only rival to Cooper Flagg in terms of, who could have a higher upside? Is it Ace Bailey? And no one talked about Dylan Harper, even though he was a more polished player initially. It was Ace Bailey's ceiling rival that of Cooper Flagg's. I made a pitch that, he's got, if everything goes right, he's Paul George, but maybe better, maybe the Tracy McGrady. I don't see that. But the point is, when you start having these hyperbolic discussions, it usually means there's some basis for why you're having these comparisons to Hall of Famers. And that's those were the commonplace comparisons when speaking about Ace Bailey. So I don't know why everyone has fallen off the map. Ace Bailey scored 18 points a game and 7 boards as a 18-year-old. He's going to be 18 on draft night, and Cooper Flagg is younger than him, but it doesn't take away from how rare it is for a guy to star at that level at that age. He's got unique blends of traits, and honestly, he's the most talented pure shot maker in terms of the way that his body is built and how that relates to the NBA. I think Tre Johnson's a better shooter. I think he's more polished. But if you were to say trait for trait, what's the most desirable combination? Ace Bailey's shooting potential and his body has to be very, very near the top of all the traits of every player in this draft class. And then he's also one of the better shot makers that college basketball's had for the last 10 years. He looks like an NBA wing, perhaps more than anyone else in the draft. Just the way that he's built, long, wiry, and has a soft shot, and it's an easy release. His release point's high. He has zero problem with the guy right in his face, shoots over the defender, or he can catch and shoot, get rid of the ball quickly, is an exceptional shooter off of curls. And people make a big point of, he wasn't a very good catch and shoot guy. That's a misnomer. He made 39% of his catch and shoot threes and 41% of them off of screens. It's just that his numbers when unguarded were strangely low. So if you really want to dive into that, he was 80th percentile, 43% from 3 on catch and shoots. And that's all catch and shoot. So some of those are jumpers. But from 3 alone, he's 39% and 41 off of screens. But on guarded catch and shoots, he's 94th percentile, 48% unguarded. And then when he's unguarded, it's 20th percentile, shooting just 30% from 3. I think that's just a fluke. He's going to be a good shooter if he's left open, and he's a really good shooter already when someone's guarding him. So the book on guarding Bailey has been stay up close and get into his legs and make him elevate or make him beat you off the dribble. And that's the concern. Is his upside not as high because he wasn't able to drive to the rack and finish there the way that you'd like a top tier guy to do? And so it's a little bit different because you don't know if he has the capacity. Whereas in the case of the Jason Tatums, the Paolo Bancheros, who are criticized for their shot selection, they were settling because they had the physical strength to do so. Ace Bailey, however, still scored 18 points a game on an inept Rutgers team and 7 rebounds and is a weak side rim protector. Like, there's a lot of reasons to like him. And you know what the main reason that I think is crazy is how often do you find someone who is either 2 or 3 to start the class, and then you start overthinking. You hear all these things like, this guy's really good and this guy's really good. But the guys who have been the foregone conclusion top 3 stop getting spoken about unless they do something wrong. And in his case, what he did wrong is measuring at the height he actually is and not the 6'10" he was rumored to be. And I think that's really hurt Ace Bailey's stock. What I like about Ace Bailey, and this has nothing to do with where he is supposed to be drafted, but just like you scrap all the narratives and you watch him play basketball, is I think his defensive upside is there. I think he can be a rim protector. I think defensively he competes. And I love his confidence. I love the part where he looks the part as a star. And then when he interviewed both on national TV, he gave a very thoughtful answer about what makes Dylan Harper good. He gave a confident answer about what he's good at. And he talked about how he's a good passer. He's not yet. He's not. Like, that is a deficiency in his game. But he has this bravado and confidence that I want my guy to be a franchise-altering talent, has to have. And it doesn't need to be outspoken. It doesn't need to be brash. But I need confidence. And the way he oozes confidence inspires hope for me that this guy could be a star. I also think that it's very rare you find someone with that build and confidence and ability to score in the way that he did with a team with little space. I think in the NBA spacing would benefit him. I think the volume of three-point shooting, especially if someone else can be a creator, would benefit him. The reason that I have dropped him, and it's not that I've dropped him far, I just really like Tre Johnson, and I've been high on the Tre Johnson train for a long, long time, is more that I don't see him as the best player on a team as easily for a contending team, because I don't think that you're going to develop twitch at the top level. Like, you're not going to all of a sudden turn 19 and become a twitchy athlete that you've never been. At all junctures of his career, he's been more coordinated, more fluid, better shooter, longer than guys. And now people are going to catch up to him in all those. And I don't think his twitch is going to all of a sudden take him over the top of better athletes when it hadn't against inferior athletes. So that's why I think that his playmaking or play creation for himself is going to be a little bit worse than I initially thought it would be in the NBA. I just don't know if he's going to be able to create as frequently in the way that Paul George has an amazing handle. But Paul George, when he was in Indiana, was a superb athlete. Ace Bailey's not quite that same twitchy level of athlete, but he is long and an excellent shooter and someone who can score in a phone booth. And I believe if you put him in NBA spacing, an NBA strength development program, that's a guy that can score 20 points in the NBA. And that's why I have absolutely no qualms. I would rush to the podium. If Tre Johnson's gone and he goes 3, let's say VJ Edgecombe goes 4, and Ace Bailey's there, I'd race the podium for Ace Bailey. Like, you shouldn't overthink the guy who was supposed to be the second highest potential in the draft, maybe the second or third best player all season long. All of a sudden he falls to the lap at 5. I wouldn't overthink it too much. And the last thing that I would say is, if he doesn't pan out as the primary option on a winning team, can he still be a number 2? Can he be a number 3? Absolutely. And I think that when you look at some of these other guys that are 3, 4, 5, we talked about it yesterday. VJ Edgecombe, I think at best you're getting a second or third option, and there's a lot of things that have to be learned. Ace Bailey was criticized for not shooting well from 3, but he was an 80th percentile catch and shoot shooter. Like, when you boil down all the numbers, it was lower than we thought it would be for him, but he was better by a significant margin than both those guys, Fears or Edgecombe, that we discussed yesterday. Edgecombe is a worse finisher at the rim despite being a far better athlete. Like, we don't talk about Edgecombe, who's a guard, having a lack of handles yet. That's all that anyone says about Ace Bailey. So I think the narrative is unfair, and I think my purpose of this show is to dispel that narrative. Is he becoming undervalued? Absolutely. I still think this is the guy that is the 3rd or 4th best player in the draft class. And if you get him at 5, then that's great. Because if on May 12th, so basically a month ago, when the combine or the lottery happened and the Jazz, what if they fell to 2? There would have been a hive of Jazz fans that said, we want Ace Bailey over Dylan Harper. and it fits our team better because we already have these guards, Isaiah Collier and Keontae George. And I would have told you I'd rather have Harper. But my point being is we would have been elated to get him if we had picked at 3. And at 2, there would have been a hive that said he's really good. And there's going to be some people that would have convinced themselves he's got a better upside than Cooper Flagg. And that's all well and good. So I don't know if I agree with the rumors that are being spread out that if he's at 5, it's not a slam dunk. And it should be, I think. I think it should be a slam dunk. It's great to evaluate all the options, and I respect those who are reporting this stuff and those who are making the decisions. But I do think there's a smoke screen probably being in place. But sometimes when there's smoke, there's a fire. And maybe he's not playing particularly well. Maybe there's some stuff going on. But you just watch the film, and from the film alone, Ace Bailey should be a top 4 pick. If he's there at 5, the Jazz should run to the podium. So coming up next, we're going to discuss a little bit more of why there are concerns about Ace Bailey and why his stock is falling, and investigate further if it's fair or overblown. I've given you my initial contention, but I want to tell you about more of the rumors I'm hearing and why I think each individual one is a bit unfair. All that and more straight ahead on Locked On Jazz. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live. I miss going to the Jazz games so badly in the playoffs. And this year's matchups are without the Jazz, I'll say that, but they're still delivering. If you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually drop closer to tip-off. And with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. Personally, I love that you can see the exact view from your seat because I want to see the sports at the perfect view. I want clarity. I don't want anything obstructing my view. And I can vouch for this feature because when I went to the U.S. Open, I went to multiple different stadiums and I got great seats and it looked exactly like it did on the website. And the app makes it ridiculously simple. 2 taps and I'm done. And also, Game Time makes scoring NFL tickets just as easy. You'll find great seats for as low as $100 thanks to exclusive discounts. And if you've never worked with Game Time to grab NFL seats, now's the time. It's seriously a game day upgrade. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time and download the Game Time app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. And I mentioned this yesterday. I love draft season, and I love this time of the year where we're 2 weeks out from the first round of the NBA draft. And as I record this, it'll be 13 days when you listen. But the most interesting part of the draft to me is the psychology and the dichotomy between the way people evaluate. Because sometimes it's the analytics versus the ball watchers, and sometimes it's fit versus the upside, and sometimes it's fit versus best player available. Sometimes it's floor versus ceiling, and you have everyone evaluating differently. But what I really love about this is I think it's overthinking season, and I'm no stranger to overthinking. And the reason I bring this up as a way to tell you why I think Ace Bailey is being talked about in a negative fashion and the concerns are far overblown is, like I said, he came in second or third on everyone's board, and now I'm seeing people reporting that it's not a no-brainer that the Jazz would take him at 5. So I'm gonna tie that in. I saw Tony Jones say, like, yeah, it's not a slam dunk that Ace Bailey falls to 5, the Jazz would take him, meaning that Jeremiah Fears, VJ Edgecombe, Khaman, Maluach would be on the table. And so those are the players he listed. I'd imagine Con Knipple would get a view as well. And then I look at these other outlets. I look at The Ringer. I look at Locked On NBA Big Board. And I look at Tankathon. And the big boards are all moving Ace Bailey down. And he's at 6 or below in a lot of mock drafts or big boards. And I think this is where there's collective think. One person reported, oh, he's a little shorter. And he came out a little short at the draft. Some people say, oh, I don't know if he's got the ability to be dynamic. Well, I think there's an element of safety to Ace Bailey. And the whole time prior, we talked about, oh, like this is the Tracy McGrady guy. This is Paul George. And at the minimum, he's Michael Porter Jr. And now it sounds like most people are saying the maximum is Michael Porter Jr. And people forget Michael Porter Jr. prior to back injury was likely to be a top pick. And people talk about how he's going to fall because he lacks wiggle. Like, yeah, you're nitpicking though. Like there's nitpicking that creates that perception of why you need to find something negative to justify moving him down. But the reason that it's a frustrating situation is people are making the exact opposite reasons for saying that VJ Edgecombe or Jeremiah Fears or Tre Johnson are better, myself included. In Tre Johnson's case, I think he's a better shooter, and the numbers would back that up. And I think he's more polished, and he also has more chance to be more dynamic because he's a better athlete. And I feel confident in the evaluation. I watch a ton of basketball, and I don't feel confident that he's that much better. Like, I really like both these guys. I just think the more I watched, I was staying tied to what I believed for a long time. And the more I watched, I felt like there was a difference between the two. However, the people who are jumping on it now and saying, oh, Jeremiah Fears because he's more dynamic, he's got a better chance of being a star. What happened to the people who said this guy had more ceiling, a higher ceiling than Cooper Flagg, that he could be the best scorer in this draft? Because Fears, if you look at shooting, he shoots 28%. I like Jeremiah Fears. I was one of the first people that started talking about him as a top 5 pick. I mean, he shoots 28% from three, and his off the bounce jump shooting is a concern. And he's a point guard, and he's not particularly big. Ace Bailey has a tremendously high floor. If he's there at 5, you're pretty happy if you get a Michael Porter Jr., especially the best version of Michael Porter Jr. But I don't like saying that that's his ceiling. I also don't think it's fair to say that's his floor. That's a bit disrespectful to what Michael Porter Jr. did. Like, he was a champion and played very well in the NBA Finals. I don't think Michael Porter Jr. is in a redraft, and most redrafts a top 5 pick, but it's largely due to health. And Michael Porter Jr. is the type of archetype so many teams want. They want someone who's 6'9" and can shoot the ball at an elite level and is a good rebounder when engaged. He's not a good defender. Ace Bailey's a better athlete than Michael Porter Jr. post back injuries. I don't think he's as pure a shooter, but I do think he's got more wiggle in him than Michael Porter Jr. did. So that's where I'm starting to have some frustration with where Ace Bailey is. His demise is greatly over exaggerated. And it's, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but why is Con Knippel seen as a safer bet than Ace Bailey? Just because he'd play a similar role to the one he played at Duke? I mean, Ace Bailey shot fairly efficiently, strangely, in a role where it was just he and Dylan Harper playing 2-on-5. The best player in the class, Cooper Flagg, made life easy for Con Knippel. So contextualizing things, I think most people would agree Ace is more likely to be a star, but I also think it's very possible that Ace is a better role player than Con Knippel, and yet would be a low outcome for Ace Bailey. Therefore, saying that's a good pick in terms of you have a high possibility of him being good, but also you have a real possibility that he doesn't pan out in the best way possible, that he can still end up being good and contribute to winning. Like, that is a really important thing to say. I don't think the gap between the floor and the ceiling is enormously vast for him. Whereas I think Jeremiah Fears' floor and ceiling has a pretty vast difference. And so I think that matters. And you know what's an interesting thing? So David Locke, when he does the analytics of, hey, who do I think has good shooting numbers that will translate? Who has good athleticism that translate using transition and using isolation? Those things are very accurate in predicting, because I think most people who can't shoot in college don't end up being good shooters in the NBA. And so I think that one's an advantage. But a lot of these players that end up, testing relatively well in isolation, but not like thriving enormously, get stronger and get better. And I think Ace Bailey could be one of those. And I think his catch and shoot numbers will get better. And they were already good. It's like dispelling a logical fallacy there. And so I remember doing a podcast, and I want to say I was a guest in February, and David asked me about the draft, and he said, who would you take, Harper or Bailey? And I said, I would take Harper because I think he's more polished. I think he's more ready to be the star of a franchise. But his point was that 6'9" guys who shoot the ball really well and have defensive upside don't grow in trees. And therefore, if he's there at 2, that David's contention was that he would still take Ace Bailey. He did another one where he talked about taking Ace Bailey. So the fact that Ace Bailey is being spoken about so negatively and saying that he may not be taken at 5, much less 6, 7, I think is ludicrous. I'd be shocked if Ace Bailey is there at 5 for the Jazz. I think that's some smoke. And I also think that if he's there at 5, the Jazz will take him. So let me know what you guys think about that. I think we talk about upside. I think there's a world he's maybe more Danny Granger-esque and maybe more like a slightly ahead of the curve Brandon Miller, because Brandon Miller came in at 21 years old as a freshman, whereas Ace Bailey is going to be 19 in his rookie year. And so I'd say Brandon Miller with more juice, maybe Danny Granger-esque as opposed to the Paul George juice. And that's a guy you really like, but he could be better than that. And there is some athletic appeal to him. He can be a secondary rim protector. He can be someone who scores the ball as the top guy. I just don't think he's the star of a championship team. And they're only usually in drafts, if you do the math on it, there's usually only one, if that. And so that's not a slight to him. But I do think it's a slight to him that so many people are dropping him for reasons that I think are a little bit more laid out as a myth as opposed to a truth. So coming up next, we're going to address some of the latest rumors, which ones I believe and how it impacts the Jazz. This will be slightly about Ace Bailey and some about, is Khaman Maluach going to be in the top 5? Are there going to be trades? I'm going to react to some rumors and say how each of those rumors impacts the Jazz's pick at number 5. So we got that and much, much more coming ahead on Locked On Jazz. There's nothing like stepping out into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped to a personal oasis. If you're wanting to update your patio this season, Wayfair has made it so easy to turn it into a space that feels like yours, comfortable, stylish, and ready for summer. Wayfair has everything you need to level up your outdoor space: conversation sets, outdoor bars, fire pits, hot tubs, gazebos, and yes, even the perfect string lights to set the vibe. It's like giving your backyard that resort feel without the resort price tag. And I recently picked up a new outdoor dining set and some modern lounge chairs, and they completely transformed my patio. And the best part, the delivery was free, fast, and totally hassle-free. Even with those larger items, it was hassle-free, and the delivery was totally free. That made me thrilled. And now, whether I'm hosting friends or unwinding with a book, it genuinely seems like I have my own private retreat each time I go out to my backyard. So don't wait. Make your outdoor space your dream oasis today with Wayfair and enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop a huge outdoor selection. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. I'm Leif Thulin, and we've been talking about, is Ace Bailey, who was long projected the second or third pick, a possibility at 5, and is his demise in terms of his falling down the draft board greatly over exaggerated? And are there reasons that are valid? Maybe, but are they being taken out of context? Absolutely. At least that's my contention. So here are some rumors that I've been seeing, and I'm sure you guys have been seeing it as well, that I think make the Jazz's pick at 5 interesting. And I'll tell you how confident I am in them happening and what I would do in those situations. So one that I do feel like has real traction, and I've spoken to people that have said they've heard about it, is Jeremiah Fears garnering real buzz as going into the top 5. So the Jazz obviously factor into that equation. Whether the Jazz take him at 5 or not, I do not know. I tried asking around, seeing if there's any interest, but did not hear anything. But the interesting part about that to me is the team that has been tied with Fears for the entirety of the draft process has been the Brooklyn Nets at 8. Brooklyn moving from 8 to 3, 4, or 5 really is interesting, because if they're to move up and take Jeremiah Fears, let's say it's at 4 for Charlotte, because Charlotte doesn't have a clear need at point guard. They don't need a clear need at wing. They already have a good center, Mark Williams, though he's injury prone. So there's a lot of ways they can go. Let's say it's Charlotte at 4, and either Ace Bailey or Tre Johnson goes 3. The 5th pick for the Jazz becomes very interesting and appealing because it's Tre Johnson or Ace Bailey to me. Now, if the Jazz are to be interested in Fears, and that's part of the discussion in terms of he's not falling outside the top 5, that's another rumor. I don't see the Jazz trading back to 8. I just don't see a reason that the Jazz would trade back to 8 unless they got a heck of a deal and got future picks. And I don't think that would be the case in terms of what their intention is right now. So while that is the rumor, I feel the most confidence in being real, that Jeremiah Fears will be a top 5 pick and someone's going to trade up to take him. I think that bodes well for the Jazz, because either they believe confidently that Jeremiah Fears is a top 5 pick and will be the guy that the Jazz can trust the ball in his hands for the future if they're picking him, or if he goes ahead, then it switches the way the draft is perceived, and the Jazz find one of the 2 favorites for me, and I think most of you guys, Tre Johnson or Ace Bailey, find their way to 5. So that one really bodes well for the Jazz, and I think there is some traction to it. Now, the other rumor that's interesting to me is Philadelphia. They're rumored to be trading the pick. There's been rumors about Khaman Maluach being the pick there because they want to upgrade their defense. I'm skeptical of that. I do think Philly wants to trade that pick because they are in a unique situation. Most teams that win 24 games the prior season, going 24-58, are not a win now team. Philadelphia had enough injuries and has enough talent to consider themselves a win now team. And their talent wise, they could be in the NBA Finals. They're not as complete a roster. Don't come for me for that. But if you look at what they've got 1 through 8 on their roster, they're pretty darn good. And so I think they want a win now player, meaning a veteran. So there's going to be a lot of packages, both from within the lottery, teams drafting within the lottery, within the top 5, within the top 10, to move up to a coveted third position, because some teams will say, you know what, the gap between 3 and 4 and the gap between 3 and 7 is vast. And they're probably right. So there's going to be a lot of popularity there. Now, how it impacts the Jazz is, of course, if the Jazz are going to make a trade with Philadelphia, the main appeal is not going to be Paul George because his contract is outrageous. You'd have to take that on. It would be the 3rd pick overall. And I think the Jazz would only do that if they keep pick 3 and 5. And that would be a very, very interesting situation. And perhaps we'll talk about that later on this week, because I've been thinking about that possibility and a few others. Now, the other part of this is if another team trades up, I think the likelihood is if they trade to 3 for Philly, it would be a team that is taking Tre Johnson. That's just the way I feel. It's either Tre Johnson or Ace Bailey going at 3. And it's more likely Philly, if they keep their pick, takes a guy like VJ Edgecombe or Maluach, and another team trades up to take one of those guys. I don't think it's likely that a team would trade up for a guy that could possibly fall. So it would have to be for a team that really believes in their scouting that they've nailed the evaluation. They get Tre Johnson or Ace Bailey at 3. And I think that Philly, if they keep it, this is the other rumor, Daryl Morey has liked athletes. I've done some digging. You look at his draft past and the way he's found himself leaning to his preferences. He really likes athletes, and VJ Edgecombe is the most apparent athlete here. I also think that Bill Simmons popularized a report saying that it doesn't feel like a Daryl Morey pick to take Ace Bailey. So who's it going to be? And he responded to that question of, you know what, I think it'll be VJ Edgecombe because he likes athletes. So I think there is some substantiated evidence if you dig deep enough. The question is, who else was available, and were they just taking athlete against another athlete, or was it an athlete versus a skilled scorer? And that is interesting. But I think the fact that Philly is in a win-now situation, taking a guy who's 18 years old and as slender as Bailey, I would take Bailey there over Tre Johnson even, because you have Paul George to teach him, which is really important when you draft a guy 3rd and you want someone to guide the youthful player that you think could eventually have the keys to your franchise. And he also fits a positional need and has plenty of upside. I would still take Tre Johnson if I were picking 3 for the Jazz, and the Jazz don't have 5. I would take Tre Johnson because I think he's better. I think he's got a better chance of being a star. But for Philly, because they're in a win-now situation, positional need matters more. And I think the difference between the upside between Tre Johnson and Ace Bailey isn't all that vast, but the difference of immediacy of impact is important there, because I think it would be difficult to play when you have Jared McCain and Tyrese Maxey, both sub 6'2", and you go get a slender guard in Tre Johnson, who also wants the ball in his hands. Ace Bailey can step in and knock down open shots, be a secondary rim protector, and not have an enormous pressure. And so that I do think is really important what Philly does. The draft starts at 3 to me. And that rumor of Philly having people interested to trade, if they trade up to 3, I think that bodes poorly for the Jazz regarding what I think the Jazz should do, drafting either Ace or Tre, should they be available. If they take VJ or Maluach, I think we're golden. And then the last rumor I saw is Khaman Maluach and VJ Edgecombe are the leaders in the clubhouse for pick 4. And that, like I said, I think that bodes very well. And I think that Charlotte is more likely to trade than initially reported, because I think with LaMelo Ball, you either have to choose to move on from him and try to rebuild, and then that makes it more alluring to take a guy like Tre Johnson. But if LaMelo Ball is going to have the keys for the short time being, and Brandon Miller is going to be his Robin, I think it's more likely they take someone with a diverse skill set as opposed to a lanky, slender guard or wing in Ace Bailey or Tre Johnson. I think it moves the possibility up for the Jazz to come up with one of Tre Johnson or Ace Bailey. So those are just my musings. about what I think of these rumors. I do think the one with the most credibility and most strength is that Jeremiah Fears will not fall out of the top 5, and teams really love him. He's been impressing. I saw something about Mike Miller saying within 3 years he'll be an all-star after training him. And, that's a lot of hype, but sometimes when there's smoke, there's a fire. And this one, I feel like there's a lot of smoke, and therefore it's got to be some validity to it. Maybe the Jazz really love him at 5. And honestly, I can talk myself into it. But I think the Nets trading up and having a trade partner with Charlotte makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of teams are coveting that 3rd pick for Philly, and Philly will entertain a ton of those picks or those trades, because it's hard to have a 3rd pick ready to impact immediately and win as quickly as Philadelphia wants, because they have a shortened title contention because Joel Embiid already is injury prone, but you got to get the most out of him while he's in his physical prime. So let me know what you guys think of all those rumors. Let me know if my dispelling of concerns for Ace Bailey has helped you, or if you disagree with me. And what do you think the best outcome is for the Utah Jazz picking at 5, or propose some ideas in terms of how to trade up and get the guy that you want. And I know we're all going to want Cooper Flagg, but try to keep it realistic. I don't think we're getting Cooper Flagg. But thank you guys for making Locked On Jazz your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On NBA Big Board. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'll be back with you again tomorrow, and we're going to talk a little bit about some possible trades that the Utah Jazz can make, both with the established players on the team going elsewhere, and then some trade targets and some draft-related trades. So all that coming up tomorrow, and another jam-packed week coming up next week that I've got Andy Larson and Tony Jones scheduled to join me, and we're going to debate what the Jazz should do at pick number 5 and talk about who's available, can the Jazz find a star, and much, much more. So appreciate you guys supporting all along, and we will have tons of great Locked On Jazz action coming up the next couple weeks.